call for a carjacking in a 2500 block of Ludlow in Daytona. Young woman's coming out to her truck, sees a male inside the truck. Male points a gun at her, gets her car keys, and takes off. That's the white pickup truck you see there. Deputies spot the truck in Daytona. They go to stop it. He tries to ram the deputies and points a gun at deputies in Daytona, and then the chase is on. Eventually he comes out of Howland Boulevard, turns north on 415, and the chase begins. We get him up here on the 44 where we're able to stick the vehicle and knock out all 4 tires. He continues on for probably several miles waving a handgun out the window. Eventually there's a line of traffic here that's been stopped. The vehicle comes to a stop. The bad guy jumps out and runs in a westerly direction with the gun to his head, and he runs directly toward a black SUV in an attempt to carjack it. One of our deputies, you can see his unmarked vehicle there, his narcotics detective, he's able to block him from actually accessing the vehicle. The gunman then turns back and runs toward the vehicles, my car there and the car with the back lifted on it, and opens fire on us. 4 deputies return fire. The suspect then runs into the woods where he refuses to drop the gun. We have to assemble a team with the ballistic shields and tasers to go in and tase him to get him to drop the firearm. Once he's secure, it's apparent that Sergeant Tommy Dane is bleeding profusely from his head, and he says, "I think I've been shot." Sergeant Dane was airlifted to Halifax, where he is talking, ambulatory, and ornery, and it is our anticipation that sometime tonight he's going to be released. And I can tell you that in 32 years of policing, this is probably the luckiest day I will tell you that I've been involved in policing, because a millimeter lower and Sergeant Dane is dead. What I can tell you about the suspect, we haven't identified his family yet, is that he had been reported missing and suicidal several days ago. And clearly his actions, when he came out of that vehicle, he wanted us to shoot him, and he was going to take one of us with him. To illustrate the point on how lucky Sergeant Dane is, we have a picture of his hat. The bullet enters the bottom of his cap, strikes him in his skull, and then comes out the top of the hat. That's how close he came to being killed today. And I cannot tell you, and having been in the middle of this, I couldn't be prouder of the men and women that I work with today. When we released the radio transcripts, and you could hear tactically how they wanted to approach the car, tactically how they didn't want to get involved in a shooting, everything that they did was to try to prevent what happened, but also knowing that this is probably what was going to happen based on the series of events and the way how erratically the suspect was acting. He was pronounced dead probably about a half hour ago from wounds inflicted by us. And like I said, I know tonight when I go home, I'll be saying a prayer and thanking the good Lord that Sergeant Dane, will be back to work real soon.
Sheriff, do you know how many shots were fired in all of this?
I think the bad guy had a 32. It stood out. You could see when it was in his hand. It didn't seem real, but it was real when you could see the muzzle flashes. He fired, I think, 3 to 4 shots, and I cannot tell you the exact number that we returned yet. It was a lot. I mean, we returned a lot. I mean, you shoot until the threat stops, and the threat stopped when he entered the woods and laid down.
So he just fired at deputies on the roadway, not in the woods?
We don't know. We haven't got into the woods yet. I can tell you personally, he fired at us at least 3 or 4 times on the roadway. When he got into the woods, it's chaos is going on. Everybody is firing. People are trying to get in the woods. We haven't got in there yet to see if more shots were fired. I know the gun's in there because I was in there. I saw the gun. Sergeant Dane's been with us, God, over 30 years. He's a SWAT operator. He's a K-9 handler. He's highly regarded in law enforcement in Central Florida. And I cannot say enough about, I didn't know he was shot, and he was standing in front of me, and he never retreated. He kept going forward toward the threat, which I think was one of the most amazing things that I've ever seen. He just kept going forward. And then when everything was secure is when we looked at him and said, "Tommy, you're bleeding." And he goes, "Oh yeah, I think I got shot." I mean, you talk about bravado and just being so focused on what your mission is. I never saw anything like that in my career.
Yeah, you were in the middle of it.
Yeah?
What was going through your head?
That I couldn't get close enough to get a shot off. because the way it was, where my car is, that there were 3 deputies were actually in front of me, and he came running at us, and it was just in a matter of seconds, it was over. And like I said, I couldn't be prouder. If you listen to the radio chatter when we release it, you can hear all the way down 44 what the strategy is going to be. You know, how to keep him away from other motorists, how not to let him run on the interstate, what happens if he gets out and runs, make sure the canines get up, unmarked cars drop back, make sure you have your vest on. I mean, it was just really to listen to everything that they did, how professional they were, you know, wanting the best outcome, but also preparing for what the worst outcome would be, which is what it was. And like I said, I cannot say enough, the good Lord, when you saw this hat, I will show you more pictures of it. It's a millimeter, and Tommy's dead.
Was it Sergeant Dane that actually stopped the carjacker from going to that other vehicle?
No, it was Deputy McDaniel. Deputy Kyle McDaniel is the one who actually, his SUV is the one that's facing it across 44. So he actually is the one that stops that carjacking, prevents that guy from getting. We've interviewed the guy. He had his cell phone run. He was filming the whole thing. But of course, when the guy ran in with a gun, he threw the cell phone, and we didn't get really good footage. We do have ring footage of the carjacking that we'll release a little bit later on. Right now, FDLE has the scene. You know, they'll do it. It's a typical police shooting. As per policy and procedure, everybody that fired their gun is on administrative duty pending the outcome of the investigation. And obviously, PTSD is a big thing you worry about in scenarios like this. Even though we're supposed to be these big, tough men and women, in reality, these things do take a toll on everybody involved.
Sheriff, how relieved are you that not only were not additional deputies injured, but there weren't any civilians left injured?
The first thing that went through my mind when he turned, when I would have bet my life when he was on Howland Boulevard, he would have went south and ran into Seminole. I would have bet my life. But when he went north on 415, the concern was school's getting out. I got a guy armed with a gun who's just going to get away no matter what. This isn't going to end well. It's a 2-lane highway, and you know, once Air 1 got over top, we were able to drift back a little bit and make sure we blocked some traffic so that the roads were reasonably clear. And we thank God we avoided that. But again, he's so desperate that at the end he drove on rims for probably 3 miles. I mean, the car was smoking. It was a matter of time before he came to a stop. Clearly, what he was waiting for was we had traffic shut down here. There was nothing coming eastbound. But once he got into this, I guess he figured here was his one last chance to get out. And then when he didn't, he figured he would take us on, and he lost that fight. Like I said, good Lord was smiling. The good Lord was smiling. He opted to run back toward us and run toward the woods as opposed to engage us in a gun battle with all the traffic blocked on eastbound. Sometimes it's lucky to be good. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than it is to be good. And you have to have a little bit of luck, and we did. He decided by Deputy McDaniel's actions actually forced him to run back toward us. Because like I said, had he got in there, he could have took a hostage, or anything could have happened. This guy was not going to go peaceably into the good night. It just wasn't going to happen. We'll have, there are 4 deputies that actually fired, so all 4 will be on administrative leave. It's per policy. You know, we do psychological exams, we give them a chance to debrief, give them a chance to just let everything settle in around them before we put them back out on the road.
Did Sergeant Dane fire as well?
Yes. Yes.
So he'll be on.
Yes. Yep.
And you said there were reports of necessity.
5 deputies fired. They're pointing 5. Okay, it was 4. 5 deputies fired. The roadway, I would say in about an hour. The only thing left to process is what went on inside of the woods, and then pick up the shell casings, and then the roadway should be opened up.
What happened in that carjacking down in Daytona? He stole a car from a woman.
Woman was in her home, was coming out of her house and saw somebody in her truck. When she went to approach it, he pointed a gun at her and demanded her car keys, from what I understand, and then he took off with the truck. She's a completely, we have ring footage of that, and we have ring footage from around the area. You really can't tell who the suspect is from the footage, but you could see what transpired.
And you said there were reports of him being suicidal before the crash?
We have subsequently learned that Lake Helen had taken a report that he was missing and suicidal one day earlier this week. That information was just put out over the air. It wasn't put out in what we would call a BOLO form, be on the lookout for. So, but either way, you know, he got what he was looking for.
Does he have any kind of criminal record?
He does.
You know?
He does. He has a criminal history in Daytona. And again, we'll get into it once his family's been notified, because his family, next of kin, have not been notified yet.
How many times was he shot?
Multiple. I can't tell you the exact number. I can tell you he was hit multiple times.
He was
All parts of his body.
Is there body cam footage?
There's body camera footage. Body camera footage, Air 1 footage, and I'll give Wesh 2 a plug. Wesh 2 had it broadcast live.
Yeah, we know.
So
he was making a beeline toward the motorist, the black SUV.
the black SUV, give me 1 second. The black SUV was parked where, see the SUV that's pointed north and south?
Yes.
That's where the black SUV was, in the far right hand, in the closer lane to the island. When he jumps out of the car, he runs toward that black SUV. Deputy McDaniel, who was behind me, hops the barrier and makes a beeline right for him to try to run him down and stop him from getting in that SUV.
In his vehicle or on foot?
In his vehicle. Bad guy's on foot. And then the bad guy retreats back behind his truck. And my car's the blue car, Sergeant Dane's car's the one with the top up. He runs right toward us. And by then, there's deputies all over the roadway when that happens.
Sheriff, is this the gray Dodge there?
It's the one, no, that's another deputy's car who swooped around and blocked them in. That's another one of our undercover. McDaniel's is the one that's pointed east and west. Or, sorry, north and south on this side of on the east side of the roadway, on this side of the roadway. The gray one is another one of our deputies who, in the midst of it all, pulled in front of the car to make sure he didn't re-enter and try to get away.
You mean the gray, like that?
The gray Dodge Durango, in front of the white car.
Are you going to be like, this guy?
Once we notify the next of kin, we'll put a press release out with his name, his criminal history, and some of the details that I told you about him being listed as missing and suicidal. One of the what he actually wanted suicide by police is what the report was to Lake County Police Department.
So he was about 10-15 yards from the targeted vehicle they wanted to carjack. And I take it there was a motorist in that car.
Oh, we've interviewed. We interviewed a slew of motorists that were here because we had everything blocked. Everything was blocked from the entrance here to the Farm Bureau's building all the way back west. So they had shut all this down, trying to get him to stop where there was nobody. We didn't want him to get into a crowded area where just would have happened, but he wouldn't stop. I mean, even though he's running 5 and 6 miles an hour, and he kept pointing the gun out the window at us during the chase.
So the deputy who blocked him may have saved that man's life.
He did. There's no doubt about it. Everybody behind could see it a lot better. The deputies in the back saw what he did. He clearly stopped that guy from being carjacked, taken hostage, or even shot.
And when was he pointing the gun in his head? When he got out of the car?
When he got out of the car, he ran toward the traffic in the eastbound lanes with the gun to his head. And then he dropped it and put down to his side and was running toward the car.
Sheriff, can you describe the weapon? You said it,
Jordan McDaniel, sorry. Kyle McDaniel's his brother. Thank you.
you said the weapon didn't look real.
It's pink. It's got a pink handle to it or something.
Was it his weapon or something?
We don't know yet. We're all, again, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to be done.
He had a pink gun?
It had a pink handle to it is what I believe.
Sheriff, how many times have you seen where a deputy is shot in the head, but is still standing, like you said, lives to tell the tale?
One time in my career, a bike cop was shot and the bullet hit his bike helmet and ricocheted up. And you would never think that a plastic bike helmet would stop around, but you know, sometimes God sits on our shoulder. And the same thing in Tommy's case. I mean, when you look at that hat again, I mean, you see on the bottom of his hat where the entrance is. The entrance is here, where my middle finger is, and the exit's up top here. So entrance, exit, it goes in and goes right this way. In a millimeter, any other direction, he's dead. He takes a headshot.
Anything else you want to say?
No, thank you all. I just, you know, I'll editorialize that everybody talks about how the police do everything wrong and all of the social ills in society are the cops' fault. And I will go to my grave and tell you we're far from perfect. We make mistakes, but when you stand in the middle of what just happened and you watch the bravery, the heroism, and the honor that the men and women had who responded to this, when you listen to all the tactics they tried to put in place to make sure it didn't end up the way it ended up, people really need to take a step back and realize that. And again, you know, Tommy's a dad, you know, and it was great pleasure to walk into that emergency room today, this afternoon, and see him sitting there with his daughter. knowing that he's fine. You know, Tommy's fine. He's got a smile on his face. He's laughing, but you can see the look in his daughter's eye. His daughter understands a lot more being the daughter of a police officer sitting there holding her dad's hand than a lot of other people really will never see that picture. So thank you.